I avoided oil paint for years. I first used it in college and I loved it, but when I started painting again many years later, the thought of all those toxic solvents, the strong odors, and long drying time led me to use watercolor and acrylic paint instead. Then, after several years of using those two mediums with mixed results and a lot of frustration, I came across a couple of artists who mentioned a solvent-free method of oil painting, and I was intrigued. I was taught to use solvents and mediums to thin oil paints and clean brushes, but these artists said that wasn't necessary. After doing some more research, I pulled out the oil paints I'd been holding on to for at least 10 years, and I gave it a try. I was hooked almost immediately. I'd been painting with acrylic for so many years that I forgot just how different and lovely it is to use oil paint. Despite how great it felt to paint with oils again, I was reluctant at first to completely switch mediums. But after going back to acrylics, I realized that I enjoyed oil paint so much more, and the medium was really much better suited to my style and my process. Most of the things I didn't like about acrylic paint was resolved with oil paint. My acrylics were too transparent and dried too fast. I have used an extender to keep them wet longer, but I still wasn't achieving the effects that I wanted. I also disliked having to maintain a stay wet palette so the acrylic paint wouldn't dry up as fast. And then disposing of acrylic paint water is another thing I didn't want to deal with. So I ordered some new supplies, including the safflower oil that would allow me to work solvent-free, and a few colors that I didn't have in my old stash of tubes. I can't express how natural it felt to paint with oils again. Don't get me wrong, painting is incredibly challenging, but oils bring a real joy to my process. There is a softness, a vibrance, and opacity achieved in my oil paintings that I had not been able to get in other mediums. Oil paint blends so much more easily, and the extended drying time allows for greater flexibility. There's also such a earthy and nostalgic feel to oils that I really enjoy. I'll make another video about using oil paint without solvents, but for now, I'll give you the basics. I paint alla prima, which means wet on wet. It's also called direct painting. So most of the time, all layers of my paintings are still wet when I finish. I usually work fairly small, less than 12 by 12 inches, and the smallest paintings are finished in the same day. I also start with a toned surface, like you saw at the beginning of this video. I use panels that already have gesso on them, and then I add a color with a layer of acrylic paint. I use acrylic paint for this because it dries so fast, so the panels can be stored the same day. Inexpensive acrylic paint can be used for this purpose. The color I use varies by subject, which I've explained in other videos. By toning my panels with acrylic, I avoid toning with oil paint, which is traditionally done by thinning oil paint with a solvent. The next way I avoid using solvent is by painting with oil paint straight from the tube. I still mix colors, but I don't add any solvent to my paint. If what comes out of the tube is thicker than desired, and this varies by brand and by pigment, then I will either add safflower oil, and I use safflower oil which is specifically made for oil painting. I get mine from Gamblin, or sometimes I use the solvent-free gel that's also made by Gamblin. It creates a nice consistency when mixed with oil paint, and it has no noticeable odor. The final way I avoid using solvent is by cleaning my brushes with safflower oil. First, I wipe off as much paint as possible on a towel, and then I run the brushes through some of the safflower oil and kind of swish them around on my palette. This continues to loosen paint from the bristles, and I can wipe off nearly all of it on a towel. At this point, I often leave my brushes standing in a plastic bag with some safflower oil in the bottom. I clip the bag to my easel so that there's less pressure on the bottom of the bristles. The next step is something I only do every couple of weeks. When I want to completely clean my brushes, I wipe off the excess oil and clean with a brush cleaning soap. Mine is from Trekell, which is also where I get all of my brushes. And then I use their brush restorer to help keep the bristles in good shape. Let me know in the comments if you have any other suggestions or any questions about solvent-free oil painting. And thanks so much for watching.